What's going on, everybody? I'm Max Ralph.
Seth Engle.
We are back, 1-0 podcast, about to preview the Ohio State game. But before we get into that, Seth, got a quick word from our sponsor.
Yeah, so it's time now for we'll tell you about an exclusive podcast sponsor, Ocean State Job Lot. Did you know that there are 150 stores in State College? Ocean State Job Lot takes pride in providing value each and every day, and now that includes our Penn State community, located right on East Ave, just 5 minutes off campus. Stock up for all your daily needs like health and beauty supplies, batteries, paper products, and much more. Plus, if you're tailgating for the Ohio State game this weekend, you'll need plenty of snacks. Don't forget to dress warm, so grab your gloves, scarves, and hoodies too. Huddle up and spread the word to all your friends to visit oceanstatejoblot.com for more info.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ocean State Job Lot. So, big game this weekend for Penn State. Quickly before we get into that, the Big Ten released its 2023 schedules yesterday, Wednesday, and I think my initial reaction to this for Penn State is that it's pretty good. This is about as good of a Big Ten schedule as you can get, really. There were some complaints because Penn State is, for the 8th straight year, opening up conference play on the road. First game comes week 3 at Illinois, but outside of that, this is a schedule that you feel good about if you're Penn State. I mean, you go Big Ten. I mean, the non-conference games are West Virginia, Delaware, and UMass, which, I mean, you should win all of those. West Virginia is an intriguing one to bring back, in my opinion. I think that's fun. But West Virginia is a program that Penn State should be able to beat these days. But then Big Ten, you go Illinois, Iowa at home, Northwestern away, OSU on the road, Indiana at home, Maryland on the road, and then you get Michigan and Rutgers at home before ending at Michigan State. And I think this is as good as you can do. You avoid the Wisconsin, you avoid the Purdue, you avoid a couple of the teams from the Big Ten West that you don't want to play that have given you fits in the past, and you get Michigan at home as usual. And I mean, you're going to flip flop with Ohio State, but I think as far as it goes, like this is really good for Penn State in what is going to be opening that window of opportunity that we've talked about in the past with winning football games.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at next season and, everyone is starting to say, okay, well, 2023 and 2024 are going to be the years where Penn State probably has the best chance of making a playoff, at least since 2016 and 2017. And when I look at this schedule right here, it complements that. It totally does. I mean, you talk about, the out of conference schedule. West Virginia is their toughest out of conference opponent, and they are a team that Penn State very much should beat, like you said. Delaware, I mean, that's a gimme.
Right.
UMass, I mean, my problem with UMass is that it's kind of placed right in the middle of the season, right before Ohio State, where, Franklin mentioned it this week, where, it's a struggle when you have to prepare for one game plan one week, and then the next week it's like a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. This is the epitome of that, where you have UMass, which is like, I mean, it's a completely different experience preparing for a team like that, and then going into Ohio State where you have to try and replicate, some of the best players in the country. It's a completely different experience. So, I mean, that's the one weird point in the schedule. Mm-hmm. But I mean, overall, it looks like, if they're able to knock off Michigan and or Ohio State, I mean, you could be looking at a 1-loss season here and, a potential trip to the playoff.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And the interesting thing you brought up with UMass is that comes right after Penn State's bye week, which, right. I mean, everybody's talked plenty about the struggles for Penn State, and especially James Franklin coached Penn State teams out of the bye week. So if there's any issues next year coming out of the bye against Massachusetts, there might be some problems. But I don't know if that's a good thing to have like a tune-up game out of the bye, or if it's a bad thing. I don't really know. But yeah, like we said, it's a favorable schedule for Penn State. But that's next year. Let's get back to this year, and this weekend specifically is about as big as it gets for Penn State with Ohio State coming to town. Ohio State is really good this year. They were my pick for the national champion coming into the season, and they haven't really shown anything that makes me change that prediction. Offense is just absurd. Defense has taken enough of a step forward from last year to complement that offense better, and haven't really played super tough opponents to this point. I think Penn State is by far the best team Ohio State will have played yet. But it's just tough. It's tough for Penn State because this team is just really good this year.
Right. I mean, you can make pretty much every argument in the world for Ohio State except for their schedule to this point. That's the one thing people have said, well, you have to give Penn State a chance here because when you look at Ohio State's schedule, I mean, Notre Dame might be the toughest opponent. Iowa was the
Iowa,
toughest defense they faced.
yeah.
But at the same time, they blew Iowa out of the water. So when I look at Ohio State right now, I see a team that is very hot.
Mhm,
This is a team that dropped 50 plus on one of the best defenses in the country in Iowa last weekend. I
mhm.
mean, Penn State's defense is not Iowa. Penn State has areas that are, you know, very good, such as their secondary and, the potential pass rush when, maybe Chop Robinson comes back.
Mhm.
But I mean, Iowa's still a step above in terms of a defensive unit, and Ohio State had no problems, against them at all. It's pretty much just CJ Stroud is on his way to, winning a Heisman this year. At this point, he seems like the favorite, and
Yeah,
that
he's the
that
betting
receiving
favorite.
core,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean that receiving core, the running backs, it's just they're loaded. They are
yeah.
loaded right now.
It's absurd, but I will say I don't know. I don't know that I agree. I think Penn State's defense is probably more talented than Iowa's defense is at this point. The secondary is we've talked about it a lot. It's kind of the thing to talk about this week is those Ohio State receivers and CJ Stroud versus that Penn State secondary because that's the best unit on Penn State's team. It is. You go from Jair Brown to Joey Porter Jr. to Kalen King. Like that's where Penn State's going to have to win this game. It's going to be similar to what they had to do against Michigan and didn't do, where you got to trust your receivers or your defensive backs in coverage and load up against the run because as soon as you start playing zone defense, Stroud's going to tear you up, and as soon as you start dropping six into coverage, you're just going to get torn up in the box, and Ohio State's going to run all over you. So it's important for James Franklin and Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter to have his guys ready to play a lot of man coverage this weekend, I think, which is going to be tough because these receivers are so good. And you just can't play zone against CJ Stroud, though, because as soon as you do, he's going to pick you apart. It's just like playing against like Tom Brady in the NFL. Like you just can't do it. He sees it so well. He puts the ball exactly where it needs to be, and he's got receivers that know how to get to their spots. So this is going to come down to Penn State's secondary versus Ohio State's passing attack because you need to be able to make Ohio State one dimensional. And that's not necessarily the dimension you want to make them be, but it's kind of what you have to do. And it is what it is. I mean, I think I wrote it in my prediction, but Ohio State's going to get theirs this weekend. Like, there is no doubt about that. You're not going to hold them down for the entirety of 4 quarters. Like, they are going to score points and score them in bunches. The problem is Penn State needs to be able to slow it down a little bit and then be able to keep up with it on the offensive side, which is where I'm a little bit more concerned, more so than the defense, even with how good Ohio State's offense has been.
Yeah, I mean it's similar. It's a similar game plan to when James Franklin would discuss, how do you stop a running back like Mo Ibrahim on Minnesota? You don't. There's no way to completely shut them down.
Mm-hmm.
But how can you limit the burns to the point where you're still competitive? And that
Mm-hmm.
was the problem against Michigan. You bring up Michigan, Penn State. They didn't do anything to even remotely like compete in that game, to even remotely make them one dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio State differs from Michigan in the fact that they are probably, arguably the best two-dimensional program in football this year. I
Right.
mean, they do everything well. It's not just like, I mean, if the run game isn't working, they have three of the best wide receivers in the country. And it was the
Mm-hmm.
same thing last year too. And if the pass game isn't working, well, they have Travion Henderson, and then they have, Mayan Williams, who are also two of the best running backs in the country. So it's really like if one thing doesn't work, they always have an answer, which is what James Franklin has tried to do at Penn State. That's what that's how you make a championship contender
Mm-hmm.
is you make yourself so well-rounded to the point where no one has an answer for you. And that's what makes Ohio State so great. And the fact
Yeah.
that their defense is now, better than it was,
Mm-hmm.
it makes them that much more difficult to compete with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the shout out Zach Allen for writing a good feature this week, but Ohio State's the gateway to being an elite program in the Big Ten. And before Penn State shows it can consistently be at that level, that's the difference. But like I said, I'm a little bit worried. I'm not worried. My concern here for Penn State is that they might do enough to slow Ohio State down more than it has been this season offensively. I really do think that the defense matches up pretty well compared to that Ohio State offense. But the problem is I'm concerned for Penn State's ability to keep up on the scoreboard.
Mhm.
I don't think that it'll be an embarrassment. I think it'll be a close game for at least maybe the score might be closer than it feels. But in the past 7 years, I mean, if you take out 2020, it's just whatever, that season didn't happen. But if you take that out, in the past 7 years, Penn State's biggest margin of loss to Ohio State is 11. Like, I think that Penn State covers the spread this week. It's like a 15-point spread. It just seems a little bit ridiculous. But like I said, I do think that the defense will slow down Ohio State a little bit more than it has been. But my biggest concern is just the offense being able to keep up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Ohio State's an offense that averages nearly 50 points a game. And I know you can make the argument that, oh, well, they haven't played anyone. That's still absurd at week 7.
Yes.
So with that in mind, I mean, Ohio State is likely to get, around 40 points, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State has done it. They did it against Auburn. They did it last week against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, doing it against Ohio State, knowing that Ohio State is going to have the ball in their hands for what's expected to be a majority of the game. I mean, that is where I draw the line.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to look better than Michigan did. I think Penn State really did kind of look itself in the mirror and say, hey, these are problems that we need to get fixed. We're not so good. We're not so talented that we can just do our thing and win games. We kind of have to play to what our opponent does best. I think they really went into that Michigan game and said, hey, like, we're a good enough team to just kind of play and hang. And that proved not to be true. And I think the absolute domination that was the whiteout against Minnesota proves that Penn State has made somewhat of a change. I think that they come out and play better this weekend. And I think that a lot hinges on being able to run the ball, being able to try and control the game flow. I don't think Penn State's going to be able to. I think that's the problem in this one. I think that they struggle playing from behind, and that's going to end up being the death of them. But I do think it will be a better performance from Penn State, especially being at home. And I think it's going to end up being, like I said, I think Penn State's going to cover the spread. I think my score prediction is somewhere in the range of 34-26 Penn State, 34-26 Ohio State. Maybe I said 27. I think I said 34-27 was my go for Ohio State. 9 points or 7 points. Wow, I'm really struggling with math today. But I think it'll be somewhat close. I don't think it's a 2-score game though.
Yeah, I mean, my score is a little bigger than yours. I do think Penn State covers the spread. With that being said, I would not take that spread if you're a betting man, just based on Ohio State's ability to run up the score.
Exactly.
My score, I got 38-25 Ohio State. I think it'll get to double digits. I mean, it's like we discussed where, Ohio State's going to put points on the board, and I just don't think Penn State's going to be able to, get to that point. You mentioned kind of playing from behind, not their strongest suit.
Mm-mm.
They'll be more competitive than Michigan. I mean, I think Ohio State's gonna win this, at least relatively handily.
Yeah, I think the score could end up looking closer than the game is, in all honesty. But yeah, I agree. Like I said, 34-27 for me and 38-25 for you, Seth. So we'll see. It should be fun. It's an important game for both programs. If Penn State wins it, they get back on track for a potential playoff look. Still a lot that needs to happen, but if it doesn't, it's not really the end of the world, because Ohio State is a national title contender this year and Penn State can still win 10 games. So there's a lot riding on this one, but it's going to be an interesting one to watch. So appreciate you guys listening, following along with us. Keep tracking online at collegian.psu.edu and on Twitter at PSU Footblog and 1-0 Pod. Peace out.